Today we are going to share with you the top 5 most important things to consider when working out your wedding budget.
So, Kelly, I've got a question for you.
Okay.
Are you a budgeter?
Oh, that's a tough one because I'm a little bit like of a budgeter, but I'm not very good at it. So I've done like our budget, like Joel and my budget, and I like have managed all our finances, but it's probably not a great idea to have me managing them because I often get like a little bit excited about buying some new clothes or whatever, and I'll splurge a little bit without telling Joel. What about you?
Well, I'm really good at budgeting when it comes to fashion.
Like budgeting money for fashion.
Yes. But not so much else, unfortunately. Doug and I have like both really, when it comes to finances, I think I was really good at finances for a while and he was really bad at it, and then we kind of swapped roles. So he became really good at it and I became really bad at it.
Yeah.
It was almost like I restricted myself so much with our wedding planning budget that I just let loose when we got married. It's terrible. And then I haven't stopped since.
No, honestly, I think I've gotten better at budgeting as I've gotten older.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was in my 20s, like early 20s, I was like, I'm going to Europe. I'm putting it on my credit card. And like when I was in Europe, I was like, I'm meant to be going home in 3 days. I was in Spain and I was like, rang my boss and was like, can I extend my trip by a week? I'm going to Canada. She was like, go for it. You only live once. So obviously cancelled my flight back home and just bought another flight on my credit card. So
to Canada, as you do.
Yeah, as you do. But that's, I don't regret it, but obviously I got into some debt. But then, as time went on, I got a little bit smarter, got a bit
priorities
more grown
changed.
Up,
yeah.
and then paid all my debts off and saved and bought a house and became an adult. So anyway, moving on to wedding stuff.
Well, I was going to ask you, have you ever splurged on something or had like a regretful purchase?
Oh, many times. Many times. One at the moment is actually buying Hank, my Labrador. No.
We all have that puppy regret.
Why didn't I get a little cavoodle? They're so small and cute, and Hank's so massive. He nearly bowls me over every time I look at him. I'm looking at Olive right now, and she's just Dana and Doug's dog, this cute little Staffy called Olive. She's just watching us record the podcast. She's so adorable.
Very intrigued. She wants to learn all about wedding budgeting, Kelly.
She does. She's actually loving this topic.
I think so.
Yeah. Is Olive the budgeter in your house?
She only budgets for food, let's
She's
be
like,
honest.
Did you say spreadsheet? Anyway, how we keep going off the topic? Sorry, it's my fault. So, yes, I did buy a pair of designer heels when Joel and I were I bought a lot of things on that trip. Joel will tell anyone that I left with 13 kilograms of luggage and I came home with 33 kilograms of luggage. Oh, my gosh.
I think that's every girl when she goes on holiday though. Really, you've got to
We bought an extra suitcase and filled it with my stuff to bring back.
It makes sense to me, honestly. I'd do the same thing.
The shopping's so good in America though. Anyway, I bought a pair of designer heels in New Orleans and I never wore them, not once. I think I just got excited that it was this brand and I was like, I have to buy something from this shop, and I didn't really like anything, so I was like, I'll buy these shoes. Never wore them. They were like stilettos. They were really high. I was too tall and clumsy to wear them, so I never wore them and they sat in my wardrobe for years.
But did you love them when you were in the shop?
I did.
Because that's why we purchase things, right? Because they make us feel good.
Yeah, true. But then it was such a waste of money in hindsight.
Yeah.
But
that's true. You want to feel good about the things that you're spending money on. Well, I stupidly one day, I've never really been into boots myself, but I bought a pair of boots at this store and I was like walking around the store in them. My friend was there and she's like, oh my gosh, they're so hot. You need to buy them. I think I was like 17 at the time. Anyway, they were like so much money, like more money than I probably should have had. And she was like, no, get the boots. So I bought these boots and then I didn't have enough money for my bus fare home. So my friend had to like pay. No. Could you imagine? At least I'd look good with my new boots.
Yeah.
Then my friend, she had to pay for like half my bus ticket home, which made me so sad, but it was very embarrassing. But like when I got home and everything, then I had like nowhere to wear them. That was super uncomfortable. And then I lent them to a friend of mine and she like fell over in them and like ruined the heel. So they weren't very well lasting at all. So totally regretted it.
That is so funny.
Yeah. Now I only buy things that I really, really love. But unfortunately, that's a lot of things.
Honestly, it's retail therapy.
Yeah.
We can't help ourselves.
Sure. Yes.
But anyway, let's get on to
budgeting
for your wedding. So you're engaged. We've already, in episode 1 said how exciting, enjoy the engagement. Don't rush into this very exciting topic of budgeting with your partner just yet.
I think maybe they need to like talk about budgeting over maybe like a glass of wine, a beer, whatever their beverage of choice is, because just to make it a bit more interesting, because it is a hard topic to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. So Dana, what is the first thing that couples need to consider?
Well, I think the first thing to consider is who's going to be there.
Yeah.
Like you need to know your numbers.
Yeah, is Aunt Karen there? Like who's on the list?
Yeah, you need to know your numbers before you know your numbers though.
That's right. That's very wise of you.
So you need to put together a guest list. I know that this could potentially get heated though, because if you're going to invite your aunt's uncle twice removed because your dad wants him there, that kind of a thing.
It can become a point of contention for a lot of not so much couples, but
the
couples with their parents.
Yeah.
Because there's often a lot of
expectation.
Opinions that come with your wedding. And it's hard for a lot of couples. I know one of my couples had her dad invited like 10 random relatives like the week of the wedding, and it was a dry hire venue. So we didn't have enough chairs, tables, plates, cutlery, like the amount of work that it created. But it wasn't the bride knew, but she was like, there's nothing I can do about it. My dad's just invited all these people at the last minute. So it's really important to have those conversations early.
Yeah.
With not only the two of you, but probably if you want your parents' input, you might.
Yeah, that's true.
Only if you want it.
Yeah, depending on how you're running things. Yeah.
Yeah.
So talking about your guest list, you need to like think about how big you want it, how small you want it. If you're just eloping, and who you're eloping with might just be like you and your besties, or you might want to have like a micro wedding, which is like 30 guests?
Yeah. Yeah. You should also consider in this how many people you would have in your bridal party.
Yeah,
because a lot of couples don't think about the more bridesmaids you've got, the more money you're going to need to allocate to flowers if you're having bouquets. Not everyone, again, speaking about traditions, you don't have to have bouquets, but they're expensive, bridal bouquets and bridesmaid bouquets. They come at a cost. So if you're having 6 bridesmaids and your flowers budget is like $1,000, you're going to spend the whole lot on bouquets.
This is true.
So have a think about your guest list, who will be on the guest list, roughly how many numbers, and then you can start to work out the rest.
Yeah. So write it down.
Yeah, write it down, type it up, whatever. Then I guess the second piece of advice we've got when it comes to budgeting is find out if anyone is contributing to your wedding financially.
Yeah, well, we're just talking about the parents having ideas on who should be invited. So I was kind of thinking, well, if your mum or dad expect somebody to be there, perhaps they should be paying for that person to be there.
Yeah, true. And And, not, and again, it is a very traditional thing to think, families contributing, like not every couple has their family contributing.
That's true.
But if you think that your parents or your partner's parents are going to contribute, it's good to know early. It is an awkward question to ask.
Yeah. Well, I think most parents will come forward. I remember my parents being like, oh, let's have dinner. And then they sat us down and they were like, oh, we really want to gift you this amount for your wedding. One set of parents were like, we really would like it if you spent this money on this particular thing. And then other parents that we had were like, no, that's fine. You use it for wherever it's kind of needed. So, yeah.
But, and not everyone has that. Not everyone has, family with the ability to do that.
That's true.
So it's lucky if you do. But
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so it's really important to know that. And then I guess in addition to that, once you know whether you're having anyone contribute and how much, then you can kind of sit down together and work out, well, how much can we as a couple afford, or how much do we want to spend on our wedding?
Yeah.
And how long will it take us to get there, I guess. So
yeah,
just working out how much others are going to contribute and then how much that you think you'll contribute to your wedding day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's really good to ask or have the conversation with whoever is contributing money to you as a couple if they do have an expectation of where that money should be spent. Like I said earlier, one set of my parents, they gave us some money and they expressed that they would like us to spend that on our honeymoon because they felt like that was super important, which it is, because you think about it, it's not then going on the wedding as such, it's going on the marriage, because it's really important to have that time together as a couple on your honeymoon. So it was really good for us to know that they really wanted the money to go towards that, and that's what we spent it on. But yeah, parents might have, or whoever else is contributing might have an idea of where they want you to spend that money, and it's good to have that conversation, as well as it might be somebody else that's contributing to your wedding. It could be your best friend, your grandmother.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're someone who doesn't have a great relationship with your parents, you might want to consider not allowing them to contribute because it can come with certain opinions and expectations, and if you want to keep that really separate, then it might be best not to involve them.
For sure.
So everyone's situation is very different.
No, that's totally right. And I think also though as well, if you're in a financial position where you can be completely independent to pay for your wedding and you don't want your parents to contribute because it might be a little bit of a burden for them, that's really a really lovely consideration as well.
Yeah, definitely. So, and you can still have a beautiful wedding on a small budget. You don't have to spend your life savings. There's a lot of, Dana and I have worked together on many beautiful elopements with just the couple with 35 guests. So anyway, there's lots of options. Number 3 is prioritizing. So sit down together as a couple and, well, actually maybe sit down separately and write down what your top 3 or 4 priorities are on where you want to allocate funds towards your wedding or what's most important to you, and then maybe come together and share those priorities.
So what would your priorities be, Kelly?
Flowers. No, I shouldn't say that. I am very conscious of my impact on the environment now, and I always have been, but I suppose it's a bit more at the forefront now. So there is a level of guilt that comes with, splurging on flowers that, may not survive another day.
Yeah.
And the impact that has on the environment. But I do love flowers. They're so beautiful.
They are beautiful.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, the visual things for me, I'm a very visual person.
Yeah.
So the styling, the tableware, the linen, I'm biased.
Yeah, well, that's exactly why you do what you do, isn't it, really?
Yeah, so music is really important to me. So I had live music at my wedding and my best friend sang when I walked down the aisle.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and she was actually a bridesmaid too. So she was double, had 2 jobs. But Yeah, so music's really important to me. So I think I do regret having like a DJ instead of a band at our wedding. I feel like if I could do it again, I'd be like live band all the way, although our dance floor did go off. So
Yeah.
So two other things that are really important to me, photography, because I feel like, you know, those photos are your lasting memories from your wedding.
Yes.
So it's really important that you love your photos.
Yes.
And food. You know, it's so important that the food's good and that everyone has enough food.
Yeah.
So that's kind of key for me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good for your guests to be well fed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Overstuffed.
What about you? What are your priorities?
So, well, it would be wrong of me if I didn't say photography.
Yeah, totally.
Yes. But I remember like for our wedding, we prioritized like food, photography, videography, and then my dress as well. So, which I didn't know was important to me at the beginning, but then when I went dress shopping without a budget, hint, don't do that. I fell in love with a really beautiful dress, even though I couldn't try it on for myself because I am plus size. So my sister tried it on for me. So we will talk about this in
another
episode down the track. But yes, it looked very beautiful on my sister too. So yeah, I fell in love with this dress. It was probably, I think that I had like this idea of what I wanted my dress to be, and then it just wasn't in the stores because it wasn't in fashion, but then it was about to become in fashion. It was a lace dress. There was like no lace anywhere. And then I told the girls at the shop what I wanted, and then they're like, oh, we do have this one in the window, and that was the one. So yeah, it was beautiful, but it was way out of my budget, which I didn't really have a budget, which was the issue. So then I bought it anyway. So
that day?
Well, I didn't I can't remember.
You put a deposit down, didn't you?
I think maybe I did, but we did go to a couple of other dress stores afterwards, and then I think that I was like, yeah, this is the one.
Yeah.
So when you come together and you talk about your 3 or 4 big things, it's good to have a look at each other's list and talk about those things and why they're important to you. And I think you'll find too that what is important to you both, like there will be some connection there. Because, I mean, you love each other for a reason. And I just think you'll probably be on the same page as to what you want for your wedding.
Well, not always when it comes to flowers.
That's
I find a lot of couples disagree on how much they should spend on flowers. But no.
I think a lot of people just don't know how much flowers cost though.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that.
Yeah, definitely. No, most couples that I work with do have very similar priorities, and they come to me once they already know what they are. But one thing I always ask them at the start of the process is, what is the most important thing to you, and what do you notice when you go to a wedding?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
What do you notice? And it gives me such a good idea of what's important to them.
Yeah.
Do they notice the linen, or do they notice the food? So it's such a good thing to find out.
So you need to talk about that these are your non-negotiables. Basically. So once you talk about these things together and you decide your 3 or 4 big things together, because you might have like 8 things on your list, let's be realistic.
Yeah.
You need to cut that back down to like 4 things. And then basically once you've got your 4 big things that you really, really want, I think it's fair to say that you will compromise on everything else budget-wise.
Yeah.
It's the smart thing to do.
Yeah, definitely. If you're working with a tight-ish budget.
Yeah. I mean, otherwise go wild.
Yeah. Splurge on everything.
Yeah.
You know, if grandma's paying for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it is hard to allocate funds, you know, in the initial stages without knowing how much certain things cost. And if it's the first time you're planning a wedding and you haven't got any experience of planning a wedding before, like through friends or whatever, it's really hard to guess.
Yeah, it is.
So, you know, it's important. You can do some research by looking some suppliers up and seeing what they charge. Some of them have their prices on their websites, but we won't go into
that just yet.
Getting quotes or anything just yet. So we're up to number 4. So the next thing to work out is what type of wedding do you guys want to have? Do you want it to be a sit-down formal dinner, or do you want it to be more of a cocktail wedding where you're sort of mingling up and about, or do you want it to be really casual like, a festival vibes with a teepee and
Wedgella?
Yeah, exactly, Wedgella. Like with like that full boho, picnic tables and
no shoes
and food trucks and like Falls Festival, Blues Fest vibes.
Ooh.
So, it's kind of important to figure out what vibe you want because it does affect your budget, because it is going to be a little bit more expensive to have a full sit-down wedding depending on how many courses of food you have.
Yeah.
So, it's important to work that out early on.
A 10-course degustation with 150 guests is going to be a lot of money, let's face it.
That's true. Very true. And, sit-down weddings come with extra costs that people don't always consider, like printed menus with drinks lists.
Cakeage.
And some venues, charge to cut your cake for you and serve it.
Is that what it's called, cakeage?
No, I've never heard that term. It's corkage.
I'm sure that cakeage is a thing, right?
I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe I'm not down with the lingo.
Cakeage.
Yeah. So it's a cool word, cakeage. No, what I was saying was with a sit-down wedding, a lot of people don't consider that, what comes with that is, your printed menus, printed drinks lists. And some people do say to me, we don't need to print the menus. Like, people just get what they're given.
Yeah.
I think.
Alternate
and I say,
drop.
but, people do sit down and they want to know what's coming.
Yeah.
So it kind of is important. There are ways, and, we'll talk about this in another episode when we talk about stationery. There are ways to cut costs with those sorts of things. You don't have to have a printed menu on every plate, but those are the things you need to consider when you're having, say, like a sit-down versus a cocktail wedding and all the tableware and dressing those tables as well with flowers.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So, if you've got a big budget, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what, Dana, I've got a question for you.
Yes.
What do you think the average wedding costs now?
Oh my gosh. Okay, that's hard, isn't it? It's changed since we got married. Can I say 38,000?
Really?
Is that too low? It's probably low.
It's really hard for me to say because I think the types of clients that maybe I work with, they might have a certain budget, but there's probably loads of people that maybe spend a different amount to that. Yeah. But what I would say that I'm seeing a lot of is 50,000.
Oh, yeah.
And
it's a good amount to play with.
I do think a lot of, but more as well, obviously. But if I'm talking average 50, maybe 60, but that's not always realistic for everyone. And I'm not talking about elopements and intimate weddings.
For sure.
But I do think a lot of the information out there about, the average wedding's like $20,000. It's so unrealistic. It's so not correct.
Yeah.
And then it does set couples up for, disappointment when they go, well, we can do that for 20 grand. Yeah. And then they go out and they start getting prices and the information that's out there is not realistic and it's not accurate.
It puts people off wanting to get married, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I think I find a lot of couples come out with an unrealistic sense of how much things cost. And it's not that weddings cost more. It's just that, how often do you throw a party for maybe 100 to 200 of your family and friends and you shout them a meal and drinks and everything all night, and then you're also decorating the whole place and wearing a really expensive dress or suit or dresses or suits.
Yeah.
How often do we do that?
Once in a lifetime, hopefully.
Well, yeah, some people do it more.
Unless you're having like a anniversary party, the same.
Yeah, yeah. The fifth and quite an important one is starting a spreadsheet. So, yes. Dana, do you love a good spreadsheet?
I do. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I had like a mega spreadsheet for our wedding.
So did I.
Yeah, it helped so much though, because you've got everything all in the one space.
So we actually have a little surprise for you guys. We've got a budget spreadsheet template free because we love you.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can grab a copy of that from either the show notes in the podcast or head to our website. What's our website URL?
It's www.theweddingeditpodcast.com.au.
Cool. Grab a copy, guys, and get started. But no, seriously, going into the spreadsheet thing, I think it's really important to, even if you're guessing what things cost approximately, pop everything you can think of down in there, and then you can start to build a bit of a picture of how much you're going to need to save.
Yeah.
And how much time you're going to need to actually save. So it starts to help you to work out a timeline of when should you be looking at wedding dates? Should it be 6 months down the track, 12 months, 18 months or longer?
Yeah, that's right. And it's really important to know how much you can realistically save in that time. But it's also really good for you to have a buffer as well, because there can be some unexpected costs that come up, or sometimes we don't think that things will cost as much as what they do. So it's good to have, I guess, a buffer to allow 10 to 20% of your complete budget. What would you say, Kelly?
I would say 20% just to be on the safe side.
Yeah.
Just because I think, just from what I see, a lot of couples don't know and they get quite a shock about how much certain things cost. So it's always good to have that expectation in your mind that you may have to allow for an extra 20%.
I guess if you don't have that though, you'll need to prepare to perhaps maybe cut some things. Yeah, compromise.
Yeah, definitely. So not everyone has that buffer, but it's good to just have that in your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So with talking about mapping out the numbers, I know it's really hard to kind of think about how much something like the florals might be, especially if you get a quote from like 4 different florists that could come back as 4 different amounts. So like, how are we going to navigate something like that? Like we would love to be able to tell you that, you know, the florist will be this amount and it will be that amount, but realistically that's not the case, and everybody has different costs of doing business.
Labor costs are different for different suppliers, different levels of experience. So yeah, you'll pay for, I guess, the people that have a lot more experience in the industry, or, you know, than maybe someone who's newer.
Yeah, I guess it comes back though to what's really important to you as well. Yeah. And I think you're going to know who you're really gelling with and who you can't live without for your wedding as well.
Yeah, and also, like I said before in episode 1, customer service. It's so important. If you are looking at suppliers and you're not getting a good vibe from the initial email or phone call, like they're not interested in you, that's your sign to try someone else.
Yeah, it's a red flag.
It is, 100%. And we're digressing a little bit. We can talk more about that in another episode. But, yeah, it's really important to map out your budget timeline, and then from there you can start to look at venues.
Yeah.
And where you maybe like to get married.
That's right. But that's what we're talking about in our next episode.
Yes.
So make sure that you tune in, and we're going to be talking about all things venues, and you're going to love it.
Yeah, and not necessarily just venues but locations, because some people might want to elope on a cliff top or something. So
So true.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in the next episode.
Sounds great.